certainly they will know they're not supposed to be taking, like, we get big trucks on Manana Lane all the time that aren't here for work. They're just passing through. So I think this will certainly help, but I still would like to find a way, once we get through this, to find a way to limit deliveries where it's not necessary to have a large truck, but we can talk about that next time. Maybe you could think about it, Paul and Wayne and Jay, and see if there's something you could come up with that we could do through the logistics plan that is legal, so that, I know, Paul, you say they won't use a bigger truck than they need, but they'd rather use many times a bigger truck than two smaller trucks. So that's where I'm concerned. And that's where I'd like to see if there's something we can do on streets that are so narrow where you can't possibly put a big truck in, where we're requiring to use multiple trucks, except for concrete mixers, like you said, the bringing rebar in. There are certain things that require large trucks, but they use large trucks many times when they could be using smaller and protecting the property around.
The thought of, are there deliveries that could be done with multiple small as opposed to one large? That's a realistic question.
Yep, that's my question, because Troy was really great with when, I talked to a lot of people back when we were originally talking about limiting truck size, and he talked to me about the mixer you can't help having on the street, but the blocks you can certainly do, and they do that on many streets. So anyway, if we can look into that, that would be terrific. I'd love to hear from the public. Antoinette, do you know if we have any public comment?
We do.
Great.
Good afternoon, Ms. Gary. Please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the committee.
Good afternoon, all. This is Susan Gary speaking from 229 Onondaga Avenue, and that's at the north end of town on the corner of North Lake Way and Onondaga. And so we are the recipient of many of these truck problems for many years. And I'd first like to say thank you for taking up this issue. I don't think this discussion has gone nearly far enough to addressing this issue that we have experienced for over 20 years since we've lived here. And I would refer you to the study that was done back in 2020 by Kimley Horn that says exactly, it says, and I'll quote from the study, the truck volume percentage in the residential areas of the north end of town are higher than in the commercial parts of town. And it's no wonder all of the residents are so grumpy about this issue. My husband and I came before this committee when our current mayor sat on the committee. That's how many years ago we have been asking for some relief. I was pleased to learn that the town hired a consultant, Kimley Horn, and they completed their truck study in 2020. What you're talking about today does not address the issue. It's not only construction trucks that are a problem. I would ask you, how are you going to identify a construction truck from other trucks? Are you going to stop and ask the truck driver what he's in town for? That just plainly doesn't work. Many of these trucks are not even marked, so I don't know how you would know what they were doing. The Kimley Horn report, and I'm sure you all have it, to me solves the problem. And it's clear, compelling evidence, number one, of the problem, and the solutions they provide are very reasonable. They're well thought out. And I think they provide an excellent roadmap for solving the problem. I'd like to talk about two things that they suggest. And one of them goes to the issue you're talking about today in particular. It's the issue of only addressing the construction trucks, which you're talking about. Kimley Horn makes the very specific recommendation that you include all trucks. And they've done studies of, they call them turning tubes, the radiuses, the number of trucks. And so it's very compelling. And they indicate that it'll actually be, it's a good reason to do it because it makes a lot of sense. Just, I can tell you right now, we are inundated with construction. That is a definite problem, but these trucks, you don't know what they're doing up here. And there's no way for us or you to know, or code enforcement to know what they're doing up here. The second, so number one is make this recommendation for all trucks. The second important, very important, compelling recommendation out of this study has to do with what they call an area-wide approach to regulation of trucks versus, I'll call it a street-wide solution. And again, they provide the reasoning for this. And I'm going to actually quote from their report. The number one reason you do this is if you only, and this is a quote, if only certain streets in a part of town are restricted, trucks would use the non-restricted streets in larger numbers. In residential areas such as the North End, certain residents would see an increase in trucks on their street if their street was non-restricted, end quote. So basically what you've done is you've moved the problem from my street to my neighbor's street. That does not solve the problem. The other compelling reason that they give to use area-wide restrictions has to do with the fact that it will require less signage. And this again is a quote from the Kimley Horn report. It says it would require less signage and it will be easier to understand by the truckers, quote unquote. Both of the quotes I spoke about regarding the Kimley Horn recommendations are on page 39 of their report. Those recommendations go to the heart of the matter of this truck issue for residents. And it's the residents who are constantly being impacted by all of this. So I urge you to look at the big picture. It's not just construction trucks we're having difficulty with. It's the landscaping trucks, the trucks with no signage. We don't even know what they're doing up here. So I encourage you to go back to the Kimley Horn report and actually solve this problem for the residents. We have been dealing this for 20 years. We're on a corner, the hedge gets knocked out, the sprinklers break and we're not here. It causes all kinds of problems for people on particularly corner lots. And
Excuse me, Ms. Gary.
yes.
We've hit the 3-minute mark. If Ms. Sarsgaard would like you to continue.
You know, I usually let them talk. I usually give
Okay.
them about 4 or 5 minutes, just because unless we have 20 people that are speaking. And you know, Susan, I think it might be good for Paul and Jay and Ben and certainly my colleague, Ted, to hear how many times your hedges have been knocked over. Because this is not just a little, you know, Susan is talking from the experience, and I've certainly gotten the calls from her when it happens, of having this damage. And it's interesting when everyone says, well, that's civil litigation. Well, why would we put our residents through civil litigation? You know, but anyway, Susan, please continue.
Thank you. I'm just about done. I think rather than my illustrations, it's been countless times. I can't recall exactly how many times our hedges have been hit. But I think the most dramatic thing that I've seen is the damage to my neighbor, Molly Noonan, who's sitting here with me. And she had some photos that Jay said he would share with you. And these incidents cover several different days, and it's continuing to be the same thing. So I'll introduce Molly and she'll speak and give her address to you.
Can you all see the screen, the photo?
We can see the photo. Is there any way to make it a little larger since there's quite a bit of white on the bottom border?
Yes, let's see. There's some other photos that zoom in.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's multiple photos. Let me just flip through them while Molly's coming on.
I'm here. What do I have to do?
Oh, there you go. We can hear you. And if you want to talk through the photos, I'm happy just to kind of scroll through one by one if your intent is to describe them.
And Molly, if you
Okay.
could just give us your name and address too. How are you today, by the way? Hello.
I'm fine, thank you. I'm Molly Noonan. My address is 1469 North Lake Way, which is on the southeast corner of Deborah Lane. It's where that drain and Big Rock and a few plants are. I bought my house there 26 years ago this month. And as I watched it be occasionally destroyed by someone going over the garden or the damaging the sprinkler system in the first few years, it didn't happen as often then. But I got this idea that I should put some stones out there to discourage people from going over the corner. I think on the next picture, if you could go to the second picture, if you can see that larger rock, I put those rocks out there. The largest one used to be closer to the drain. And what has happened is that it didn't stop. It was not a successful project. That large rock has been knocked into the road maybe a half a dozen times in the last 20 years. It can't be moved without a machine. So I usually have to call the police to get them to put some cones up so that no one hits it. And then I have to hire someone with a machine to put it back. And the smaller rocks there, which are almost underground now, well, you can see how if a large truck drives over that, it just not only destroys the garden, but the rocks. I've had a lot of time to think about why this is such a problem. And I think it's because since the really large trucks don't go up North Lake Way for the reasons you've talked about down by the country club, they come up North Ocean, even if they're destined for North Lake Way. Deborah Lane is the first left after you leave the ocean. And they come over Deborah Lane, which is very narrow. And as you can see from this picture, it's not a perfect 90-degree angle turn. It's a very sharp left turn to go south on North Lake Way. So they almost have to either go over that corner of my property or they have to back up a number of times. And I've seen what happens. I often see the trucks themselves because I'm in my house and I hear the beep, beep, beep that trucks make when they are backing up. And I've come out sometimes to watch them. And they're by no means only construction trucks. There are all kinds of trucks, delivery trucks, garden trucks with trailers. Most recently, a couple of weeks ago, I saw a long flatbed truck with a single car on it, heading to deliver that car to an address on North Lake Way. So, and often, even if I know who it is, I'm really not inclined to take their license number and go to court and start suing. I'd be doing that 3 times a week. It's just all kinds of trucks that you can see there. My sprinkler again has been damaged. So the water is around the drain because of the sprinkler being damaged. And you can also see that the drain doesn't drain anymore because the ground around it has been so depressed by the trucks going over it. On that top picture there, you can see how when they can't quite make it around the corner, they back up onto that other property on the northeast side. And you can see how dug up that is. That's Nick Coleman's house. And I'm not sure you have a picture of the other side, but the property across North Lake Way from me, Sylvester Stallone's house now, has the same problem, that they run over that. In fact, just this morning, when I came home from Publix.
That's it right there, I believe.
No, that's Nick Coleman. That's still Deborah Lane.
That's Nick, okay.
There's one there. That's
There.
Sylvester's.
Yeah.
You can see they there are 3 different properties that end up getting damaged by large trucks, any large truck, trying to make that sharp left turn. And just this morning, when I came back from public